Writing is hard. You can almost hear the words floating out of the minds of Hollywood executives today. Every new release has been rehashed, sequel treated, or derived from a famous franchise. And no one would blame you if you pointed a finger at Marvel Studios as creating this thing. It's intellectual property, or IP for short. A buzzword flying around the industry these days. It basically means that the movie's origin story was a really popular thing from another medium. For example, books, think Harry Potter, comics, Marvel and DC, or video games, Five Nights at Freddy's, or Uncharted. It's the movie equivalent to your work hiring someone because they have massive social media reach. But intellectual property is not new. It's become more popular today than ever before, but it's not new. We can look back and think it wasn't around before the 2000s, but it definitely was. So why does Hollywood rely so much on it? Okay, the answer's money, but let's, do an episode, okay? Welcome to Another Lens. My name's Jay Kennedy, and I like movies. On this show, I'd like to explore what's happening today in the world of film, dive into Hollywood's short history, and share with you my thoughts about what's rattling around in my head when it comes to movies. So if you'll join me, grab a hot cup, get comfy, and let's take a look from another lens. Since the turn of the century, the rate at which sequels and reboots are being distributed is somewhat alarming. But what if I told you that we can track this trend at the box office all the way back to 1930, when Tom Sawyer raked in a staggering $11 million. Mark Twain's beloved fiction story was printed in 1876, but the book actually only garnered commercial success after the release of its sequel companion, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, in 1884. It was only then that Twain's Sawyer boomed with mass audiences. This sort of seems fitting for today's topic. These days, you would be hard-pressed to find a film topping the box office each year without attachment to a recognized IP. Since 1998's Armageddon, there's in fact only been two, with an asterisk. Frozen in 2013, which I suppose could be argued has an IP relation from the fairy tale The Snow Queen, and Avatar in 2009. And while both have seen the sequel treatment, Avatar remains the highest grossing film of all time with $2.9 billion with a B. In a time when all we see on screen are sequels and franchise extensions, it's remarkable that the highest grossing film remains one that fell out of James Cameron's brain. Oh, the asterisk I mentioned happened in 2020 during the pandemic. The highest grossing film worldwide of the year was a film called The 800, a Chinese war film that you may have never heard of. However, in North America, the top film of the year was still a sequel, Bad Boys for Life. Now, while IP has always been a culprit in nabbing mainstream audience attention, seeing a new idea top the year's box office used to be fairly commonplace. In the 1990s, the box office ranked 8 out of 10 years of movies as original content to viewers. The 2 years that overtook these original stories saw the incredible animated adaptation of Beauty and the Beast in 1991, and, you guessed it, Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace in 1999. The high concept pictures of the 1980s were actually closer to what we see today at the box office. 4 out of 10 years gave us 3 sequels and a new comic book adaptation. Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back in 1980, Superman 2 in 1981, Star Wars The Return of the Jedi in 1983, and Tim Burton's Batman in 1989. The 1970s were a glorious time for new ideas. Hell, even Best Picture winner The Godfather Part 2 was beat out for box office dollars by Blazing Saddles in 1974. A comedy of all things. That's another podcast right there. In 1966, the Bible took in $35 million, which, yes, may sound blasphemous, but you can't argue that it doesn't sell better than an Iron Man comic book. And to that respect, in 1956, The Ten Commandments took home $85 million, the highest grossing film of all time up to that point in cinema's short history. Disney has always been in the game, with films like Peter Pan, Cinderella, Pinocchio, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs all winning their respective years' box office with their fairy tale adaptations. To some, these titles may not be accounting for taste, so you'll be disheartened to know that since 1930, only 13 films have both won the Academy Award for Best Picture and the top spot for box office dollars. It Happened One Night in 1934 with $2 million, Mutiny on the Bounty 1935, $2 million, Going My Way in 1944 with $16 million, The Greatest Show on Earth in 1952, that also wrangled $36 million, The Bridge Over the River Kwai in 1957, that was $33 million, Ben-Hur in 1959, $73 million, The Sound of Music 1965, $286 million, The Godfather in 1972 with $133 million, Rocky in 1976 with $117 million, Kramer vs. Kramer in 79 with $106 million, Out of Africa in 1985 with $226 million, Titanic, the first film to ever gross over $1 billion, in 1997 made $1.8 billion, and The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King in 2003 with $1.1 billion. I'm sure you're not shocked to find that only one of these films is a sequel to an ongoing franchise. Last year, in 2023, only 2 films in the top 10 were not attached to any existing IP. The Pixar film Elemental in the number 9 spot, and Oppenheimer. Since the Dark Knight trilogy, Christopher Nolan has been a really big deal at the box office when it comes to introducing the world to brand new ideas. And whether you like his cinema stylings or not, that is commendable. In the weird time of 2020, he released Tenet, which was the 5th highest grossing film of the year. In 2014, Nolan's Interstellar was the 10th highest grossing picture, just behind a slew of sequels. And now, Oppenheimer sits at number 3 with $951 million worldwide. So in today's Hollywood landscape, the biopic outlier often contends with franchise fatigue with popular films like Bohemian Rhapsody and Elvis. But even those do rely heavily in an audience knowing the story behind a person or band, and that usually gets the ticket sold. And while I may not love biopics or these particular pictures, I do see their merit in the long game of Hollywood. These are new and shiny, and we should respect that they're here amongst the herd of superheroes and monsters. Not to discount the other type of hardworking outliers in the year's box office, the animated gems that are being released. Elemental is hardly the first top 10 moneymaker in recent history. Zootopia, Inside Out, and The Secret Life of Pets come to mind. These are movies that are completely new, bringing exciting characters and inevitably an onslaught of sequels. Inside Out 2 is coming to a theater near you very soon. I stew in these thoughts because it's been an awful long time since anything that wasn't a franchise film or relatively popular IP has hit a box office's top 10 that wasn't animated or directed by Christopher Nolan. The last completely new idea was actually 2015's The Martian, hitting number 10 of the year. Before that, 2013's Gravity found its footing. Maybe space movies are the key here. But these outliers can't move out of the way fast enough for Hollywood's biggest payoffs, the intellectual property. Since 2014, every year has been dominated by franchises, sequels, and new IP. Last year's Barbie is headed in the right direction, with outstanding storytelling wrapped up in real-world themes. But it's still tied to a massive pre-existing property. So for us cinephiles, we can only look to the future, where maybe, just maybe, we'll get a brand new idea landing in that top spot, forcing Hollywood to think, maybe original is a good way to make some dollars? But if it does, it's not likely to stay there, as the third installment of Avatar is on the docket for 2025. I really appreciate you sticking through to the end. Reach out to me anytime at j.kennedy@outlook.com. New episodes are available weekly, so be sure to subscribe for the next one. I'm Jay Kennedy, and you've been listening to Another Lens. The show will be back soon with another perspective.